African Navy and the National Treasury over who's to blame for the military's chronic budget woes. Admiral Monde Lobesi says Treasury is sabotaging the SANDF. It's a claim that the National Treasury has flatly rejected. They say that the Defence Force must fix its own internal problems. Of course, there's a deeper crisis behind these headlines: aging personnel, outdated structures, and billions that have been lost to mismanagement. Let's talk now to Songezo Zibi, the chairperson of Parliament's Standing Committee on Public Accounts. This is SCOPA, who says simply that throwing more money at the military without reform is going to be a grave mistake. Songezo, good morning to you. Welcome to the program. Thank you very much for your time. We heard there what Admiral Lobesi has said, publicly blaming the National Treasury for sabotaging the SANDF. You're arguing that this narrative oversimplifies the issue. Do you believe the Treasury is being scapegoated? What is the actual process here behind these decisions about granting or denying military budgets?
Good morning, Iman. Yes, I think it's being overly scapegoated here by the Admiral. And I think the Treasury is an easier target because then it doesn't get into trouble with the President because he is a Commander-in-Chief, and that is whom he should direct his unhappiness at. That Commander-in-Chief is also the chairperson of Cabinet, and it is Cabinet that approves the budget for tabling to Parliament. So to simply blame the National Treasury is actually disingenuous in my view. What is true, however, is that the Defence Force is chronically underfunded. I've said this many, many times. So what is saying objectively in terms of the Defence Force needing more resources is really true, because every time there's been a budget cut over the last 15 to 20 years, the Defence Force has borne the brunt of that, because South Africans for a long time have not believed that we should fund the Defence Forces at all, and we are beginning to see the outcome of that.
Well, let's go to what you're saying, and I think you've also paraphrased it as a financial horror story, what's happening there. What does it mean for the average South African, and why then should Parliament be cautious about increasing funding under these conditions?
So the first thing, Iman, is in fact just three things quickly. The first one is that one of the things that needs to be done, or two of the things that need to be done in the Defence Force, just in terms of what it needs, is younger personnel. A lot of the fighting soldiers are really old. The average age is nearly 40. It should be somewhere around 21, 22, or at least under 25, for example. The second thing is that the equipment that it's got is old and is misaligned with the mandate of the Defence Force today. So those kind of things need to be fixed, together with getting a better management and generals at the top. But the Defence Force is one of the focus areas, by the way, the Department of Defence, for the Standing Committee on Public Accounts, because in terms of the audit outcomes, it's a horror story. There's no other way. For the last 3 to 4 years, they've had a disclaimed audit opinion. There is no proper record keeping. They can't properly account for money. They buy equipment and other things which they proceed not to use because they are obsolete, whether that is medical equipment and so on. And we've seen over the years them spending money on some Cuban misadventures, buying medication they're not going to use and so on. I can carry on. So the financial management is really poor. And when they get that money, they're going to waste it and also use it outside of what the defense review said they need to use. The last thing that I want to say, Iman, is an issue in the Defence Force is the fact that they refuse, the Auditor General told us, this is public record, they refuse to account to the Secretary of Defense on administrative issues. They don't submit to civilian oversight. So they're a law unto themselves because they also don't report directly to the President. So they do their own thing. Now, we can't appropriate tens of billions more to give to people who are going to misuse it, steal it, and then refuse to be accountable.
Well, this is the thing, just listening to you and of course, having had sight of this conversation before, it's very concerning that such an important body, I mean, these are our armed forces, are quite frankly, as you say, a law unto themselves. You have spoken frankly about promotions based on loyalty rather than competence. This seems to be a people issue. How deep is this culture? And are we ever going to get the alignment that you say is needed between the needs and the dysfunction of the SANDF as it stands right now?
Let me put it to you this way. Since the integration of the armed forces, the worst of the cadre deployment is in the SANDF. If you don't come from the liberation movement, a kind of background, you battle to get a promotion. That's what the younger officers say. That's generally what we see. Of course, there have been some former TBVC state senior officers that we've seen, General Titi Matanzima, General Derek Mgwebi, and others. But generally, what you have is the kind of cadre deployment that makes people unhappy in the civil service. It's untouched in the defense forces. It's also one of the reasons the Department of Military Veterans is a complete mess with the worst possible audit outcomes in terms of financial management and meeting targets. That is why I said in the defense budget debate that we need some change at the top. If we don't get the change at the top and get younger, better educated, more worldly officers, we are going to continue to fund a crisis, and we shouldn't be doing that. We must demand better leadership, better accounting for money, so that we can fund the defense forces we should. There are no free lunches here.
So you're the chair of SCOPA, Songezo. You've got insight into how these departments are handling the public money. This is what you've now been sharing with us. The committee has found problems in the way that procurement happens, the financial controls and the accountability within the SANDF. Now you're saying that in order to neutralize that corrosive element or these corrosive elements in the SANDF, we need fresh blood, we need new people. Well, how do you build that transition, and what power do you have as the committee to be able to lead that charge of putting new, younger people who don't have any of these historic ties and potentially then don't have any either scores to settle or relationships to honor? I mean, and I'm paraphrasing that badly, but this is certainly the accusation that you're making. So how do we fix this then?
This is up to the president and the minister. And because unfortunately Parliament does not make executive decisions. What Parliament can do is to agree on whether to appropriate more money or not to agree. And so far, for successive parliaments, successive financial years, Parliament has chosen to appropriate limited increases for the Defence Force. I don't think it's right. I think it's time to overhaul and fund the Defence Force properly, to make sure that the Navy is at sea, to make sure that our jets can fly and that kind of thing. I really want that for the Defence Force. But to be frank with you, it's up to the president. It truly is.
All right. So then, again, I mean, we've seen public pressure on the president for different things, whether it comes to the holding on to or the not firing of Senzo Mchunu, or handling this particular issue around allegations that were made by Lieutenant General Mkhwanazi. And depending on who you ask, there would be some issues in the leadership on this one. Why is it particularly urgent, Songezo? And I mean, we only have to think about, the body bags coming home after what happened in the DRC in respect of our soldiers and deployment as part of the SAMI DRC. The questions about whether they had enough support and so on. So we can see the manifestations of not having the right support resources at the right time to what happens to our troops on the ground.
Look, the other thing that South Africans must also reckon with is that in order to give the Defence Force more money, we need to raise the money, which means higher taxes. One, either that, or we need to take funds away from something else. Now, one of the things that is unhelpful in this discussion is that people also never say which programs must not be funded so that we can fund the Defence Force. So it's a bit of a dishonest conversation in that everybody treats budgeting like Christmas, where there must be money for everything, no choices, no sacrifices. That has been the failure of Parliament. That has been the failure of Cabinet over the years. And I'm hoping that now that we've got a different chair of appropriations in Musi Maimane, and I've seen him intervene a few times, where he encourages the portfolio committee to come and justify a higher increase, such as we did for State SA, to say, come back to the appropriations committee, ask for more money, we'll listen to you, we will reallocate the money from other priorities. But South Africans must know that what it means is that another program they care about will get less money. And South Africans don't like choosing.
All right. So again, as you say, decisions really lie in moving the hand here of the president and the minister. We're going to have to make some invidious choices, which, as you say, South Africans don't want to make. All the while, time is passing, Songezo. So what is an elegant, effective way out of it in this moment?
So we are supposed to have the Minister of Defense coming later on this year for part 2 of our conversation, because when we spoke to her in February, we understood that she was relatively new in the portfolio. We gave her time to effect some of these changes that we're talking about in defense and also in military veterans. And I want to be clear, we're not asking for a wholesale clean out of people. That's not what we're asking for. But we want to see that in the most problematic areas, such as procurement, financial management, planning, and so on, there are new people with a better plan for how to manage the money. Because the Standing Committee on Public Accounts is also able to make representations to appropriations and the Finance Committee in terms of allocations in future. But we have to see the evidence that the changes that need to happen in terms of how public money is used have been made. So we'll be calling the Minister of Defense back in around October, November this year.
And we'll be watching. Songezo Zibi, thank you. Chairperson of Parliament's Standing Committee on Public Accounts, just talking to us about the SANDF budget challenges.